Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian show on POT TV. My name is Sasha Star, and our guest today is Steve Rao from POT TV. He's a political commentator and a professional politician. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Former recovering politician, but Sasha, always a pleasure to be here.
Well, politician is a politician. It's whether it was in your
Yes, we'll always have
past
the name
or
honorable.
it's in your future. You cannot
Yes,
dismiss it
we're in the
easily.
United States. You always keep the name honorable. So,
Yeah, that's right. Steve, let's come to the point of which is not always available in a Western media, whether it's a Wall Street Journal or some other, but there are some European, very influential sort of publications like Financial Times, like Wall Street, like The Economist, or so on. And based on that information from Europe and what's available here and so on, I was able to make a certain picture as of today, what's happening in the world. And I'd like to see if you share this situation. So there is a war between United States and Israel on one side and Iran on the other side. We know all that. Right now, there is sort of a pause where Trump wants to come back to diplomacy, and that is probably the only right way of dealing with the situation because other options are much, much worse for the United States than this one. Now, this one is not easy either because Iran already made an announcement that they are willing to continue the memorandum signed by Trump on June 17th. And that works the following way. So, number one, you free the Strait of Hormuz, number one point. Number two, you leave all economic sanctions against Iran and provide the financial promises of all kinds to Iran, as it was indicated in this memorandum. And only number three, once number one and two completed, there comes number three. It's a question of a nuclear abilities of Iran or inabilities of Iran, it depends, and you deal with that. Okay, so that's what's happening right now. So the likelihood of that working out is very slim because you have to perfect number one, number two, and only then you come into number three, and you will have 60 days after, actually 60 days would have to start new count because there were a period of 2 weeks or so bombardment, so I don't know if it's part of 60 days, very unlikely. Okay, so that's on one side. On the other side, there is a war of Ukraine and Russia, which Ukraine is now winning by all counts. Um, it's difficult to hide, and I think Zelensky is playing a coy by saying, "Well, we are ready for peace negotiations." What kind of peace negotiations? When Moscow is burning, when all the Russians they have no gasoline, they cannot run the normal life. It's obvious. Number three, Ukrainian has destroyed two either Iranian or Russian ship carrying the Iranian ammunition, whether it's Shahid drones or I don't know what else was there. And Iran is saying that they will punish Ukraine for this. Number four, Donald Trump now wants to have Ukraine its a main strategic partner and military partner in Europe. He is fed up with NATO, with Germany and France and the UK and whoever is there else, because Ukraine alone is much stronger than all these countries. So he doesn't need all these countries, he needs only one, Ukraine. So Ukraine now has to be very careful because does it want to go to bed with very weak United States? As China said, they are strategic partner of Iran, and in case of invasion, they will defend Iran, and so is Russia. Furthermore, China said to United States that you've spent 80% of your ammunition. You have nothing to fight. You cannot protect your allies in the East, like Japan, South Korea, and never mind Taiwan. You cannot do that. You have no power. Okay. Now, countries in the region like Kuwait and Arab Emirates and all these 7 oil-producing countries, they want U.S. out. Why? U.S. actually already moved out their military bases because they're saying if you cannot protect your own military bases, you cannot protect us. So therefore, we are much better off if you're out, and we will ourselves negotiate with Iran a way to come back to normalcy and continue on with our business. We don't need you here. So is that advisable, do you think, for Ukraine to join U.S. in some kind of military alliance, what it might be?
The only, you've given me a lot of things to talk about, Sasha, but let me answer this question first, and then I've got some of my own ideas. And on this show, what I'm trying to do, get a better job of, it's really hard. A lot of news media outlets just report the day-to-day things going on every day. But I love what you're doing, kind of taking a step back and really looking at a macro high level of what all of these multiple conflicts mean to the world, whether it's the economy, whether it's the stability of the world, diplomacy, military strength, all these things matter. So as it relates to Ukraine, it is a bit of a, well, I know you and I have always been a bit optimistic on the resilience of the Ukrainian people. And I think the Ukrainian war has shown that technology, innovation, drones, autonomous capabilities are changing the way warfare is fought, and how such a small democracy like Ukraine can be such a threat to Russia. But they have, and they are winning the war. Russia has lost more territory than it's gained. I think the only advantage of a military alliance from Ukraine's perspective is that they still need to strengthen their air defense systems from Russia's continued drone attacks as well. So any kind of relationship with the United States could help in that way. Congress has been talking about sanctions against Russia. Sanctions typically haven't worked, but I do think with the economy the way it is, so many troops demoralized in Russia, this might be the time. So I wouldn't walk away from a military alliance with the United States. However, you and I have always been skeptical of Donald Trump, in terms of his ability to stick with issues. I mean, a while back, he was, 4 years ago, or like in his first term, or when this first all happened, he was like, I'm standing by Russia. This is great. Now he sees, he realizes that they're losing. And so what he's trying to do now is say, let me have an alliance with Ukraine. And then if it's successful, then whoever his successor is, whether it's Rubio or Vance, can say, look, I told you, Stor, I just negotiated, and won one of the greatest conflicts since World War II. So that's my take on it. I'm a bit of a skeptic, anything coming from the Trump White House. But kudos to Zelensky and Ukraine for getting the 47th president of the United States to change his position.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there's another layer of this question is that U.S. is not very dependable ally itself. So U.S. can say one thing and next day completely change it. That's what's happened with the memorandum with Iran when they signed, and then the next day or two they already started to change it and imply certain things that were not part of the memorandum. So thing is with Ukraine, okay, Ukraine say, okay, we are allies and so on, and the US will say, okay, you attack Iran from the Caspian Sea, or you do this, or you don't want to do that, then you're not ally, we cannot work with you, and so on. And it's very, very unpredictable, moody, unreliable ally. That's what U.S. unfortunately is at this present time. So Ukraine has to be very carefully and weigh all their options.
Yeah, and it goes back. Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things I interviewed David Walker yesterday. I moderated the economics show, but David has always done a good job of talking about the four areas of, what we look at as superpower: economic strength, military strength, diplomatic strength, and then cultural influence. But I think it's fair to say today, the United States, a lot of people are questioning the economic strength, even though it's still the strongest economy in the world, still lots of problems at home. The military strength, are they overextended? Diplomatic strength, no longer really a country that's building alliances, kind of developing more of an isolationist foreign policy. Let's go in and conquer Iran. Let's go in and conquer Venezuela. Let's not really worry about a transition plan. Telling the military, you better do what I say, firing senior officials from the military, really abandoning a lot of protocols. So really, I think you raise a good question. Would I really want the United States as an ally? Is it the same thing as it was 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago? I think the answer to that question is no. And so it really, but Zelensky is a good politician. If I were him, I would just continue to do what he's doing and, play hard to get, and negotiate whatever he can out of the United States.
Yeah, I'll tell you that U.S. is low on ammunition, like Patriot interceptors. It's down to 20% of its necessary level. China, first time ever, openly said to the United States that you are not capable anymore to protect your allies in the East, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Do you think it would happen 5, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? It would never, ever happen. Right. But now it's happening in the open. They are challenging US openly, and US is very quiet about it, because what US can say is it's not true. We have millions of interceptors. You have wrong information. What they can do? They can do nothing. Be quiet. That's all.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say, Sasha, that I think is an important point to make is that typically the United States, I've been studying this a little bit recently, reading some books, has used military power not as a tool for advancing your political interests. And I think that's one real concern I have as an American and an analyst and the son of immigrants. The United States has always been a country where we worked with allies, for example, in World War II, World War I. We typically try to build coalitions with countries when we're doing things. And there has to be a sense of what is going to happen after you invade these countries. But this whole idea of what I call diplomacy and deterrence. So on one hand, you say, I want a diplomatic solution with Iran, but if you don't, what I do, I'm going to pulverize your nation with more bombs. Not necessarily, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. And I think it's a foreign policy. Does it make sense? I think it's demoralizing to our military to have a president that's not really looking at things strategically, that's abandoning protocol. So this has created a lot of concern. And the United States, I don't know where it is in Canada, probably is true though, you have to go with the chain of command. So even though there are militaries like, people like Admiral William McRaven, who's an analyst now and a very sought-out speaker, longest serving leader in the Navy SEALs, he has said that, he can't tell the troops that he commanded once, don't listen to the president, because they are in the military and they have to follow the orders of their commanders. But I think this war in Iran is a mistake. And I think the final thing I'll end with is that one thing we can learn, especially on this show, is all of these conflicts happening at the same time have an effect on the entire world. Energy, the costs, the fear, the security interests, all of us, it affects all of us. And so that's all I've got to say is that you raise a good point. We have multiple conflicts going on at the same time with no clear resolution in sight. And I think it's just got a lot of people in the world worried.
What's interesting, you mentioned something earlier about possible using of nuclear option of one of the powers, whether it's Russia or United States. There are some other countries to a lesser extent. What's the problem with using the nuclear option is, whoever first using nuclear option, I'm talking about all-out nuclear war, not limited use, but all-out. Because limited use, there's not much you can gain by doing that. And that's why Russia is not using it against Ukraine. But all-out military options, the problem is that it comes to certain death or substantial calamities for both the attacker and the defender, or both if they are using it at the same time. So it creates an acceptable level of damage. So that option is out. Okay, you will hurt your opponent substantially, but you will be hurt just as well. So then what you gain? You gain that you distract the other guy 75%, and the other guy distracted you only 70%. So the 5%, you did more damage 5%, but 70% you suffer the damage. So what's the use? So instead, the Third World War could be used only conventional weapons, and that's where both Russia and United States are in very precarious positions, because for years, for dozens of years, their military doctrine was based on use of nuclear option. Now, if you take out nuclear option, you have no interceptors, you have no necessary number of fights, the fighters, and so on and on. And Russia already learned it the hard way, what it is like to fight conventional war with the determined enemy. And believe me, Iran is very determined enemy, no less than Ukraine. They're about the same for different reasons. I'm not trying to compare them at all, but both resisting the superpowers like US compared to Iran is still a superpower. Russia, to compare to Ukraine, was a superpower, not anymore. So you see that conventional war, which will start from several, well, even take a look at Russia has a very small border with Norway. So the Russian ambassador to Norway now, 2 days ago, I think on Sunday, he said to Norwegians that we know about your help to Ukraine, and if you will continue to do so, we will take a look at that and we will punish you for helping Ukraine. Wow, what a statement. I don't know if Norway will take it seriously enough, because I think Norway alone can defeat Russia if such a calamity would ever happen. But nevertheless, that's just another angle at looking at the international situation as it is now. So, in my opinion, U.S. has to be very careful how they use their international stature, power, ammunition, and maybe to take a step back a little bit, just step back, because if they will just open Strait of Hormuz, okay, will they leave sanctions from Iran? It doesn't cost U.S. anything, okay? It doesn't cost us anything, yet they will gain politically. What I'm afraid is that the present US policy, especially Donald Trump, in the last year and a half since he got the power, his reasoning and his reasons to do one thing or another is very, very easily explained by gaining financial gains for himself, his family, or so on. And I think that's the most important thing. It's not international policy. It's not issues of war or peace with Iran or Ukraine or Russia or just anything. He went to Venezuela. Why? He wanted to seize Venezuelan oil. He thought that he will do the same thing easily in Iran. That didn't happen. So on and on. And then he was talking about to take charge from all the ships leaving Strait of Hormuz. So it's United States or corporation set up by Trump and his relatives or whoever else there.
And there was always
this is tragedy.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Yes, there is so much evidence now of this president's administration benefiting his family financially, whether it's the oil interests, the relationships he has with dictators around the world. There's been speculation of his work with Putin in the past, but at the end of the day, I think there's always been a sense in the United States of America that if you look at World War II, we backed you. You made a statement of love. Back up a little bit. How do we help rebuild countries? How do we help create a strong Europe. And it worked in the world for many years with most of the post-Cold War era. Now you had the Cold War between Russia and the former Soviet Union, United States of America. Then the dissolution of the Soviet Republic. When I left Emory, that's what was happening in 1999, 1992, when I graduated from college. But now I think you have this foreign policy that it's all about America first, me first, what I want, ignoring what is in the and look at these conflicts. So what happens in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, is going to affect Europe from food security, energy, stability of NATO, the European alliance. The only good news is NATO is stronger today than it was even during Biden's administration in terms of being stronger and supporting Ukraine. But the Middle East, which you've done a good job on this show talking about, is affecting energy, oil stability, oil prices, and stability in the world. So this foreign policy that Trump has done is now, Ukraine, it was Russia, but I wish he had been standing up to Ukraine much longer earlier than just doing it like the 11th hour when we all know that Russia is losing, right?
One more point I wanted to mention is that Trump, starting his second term, he started to denigrate NATO, and he started to basically almost fight United States' own world order that United States so carefully built and successfully did so from the end of Second World War up until first term of Trump. So Trump is he's trying to liquidate U.S. Own world order, where U.S. worked so hard to do it. So essentially, Trump is the biggest obstacle on successful U.S. foreign policy ever U.S. had to make. And this is a big, big problem. So he's destroying the world order that America itself built, and it was ahead of that world order. So he's destroying that, and what he's offering instead, that's unclear to me. What do you think?
And yes, I mean, because I think, and I know we're talking big picture here, but I think it's important on these shows to tie it into history, look at the future. But, what we always had was a post-World War order where there were accepted norms. You wouldn't invade a democracy, just cross over the borders and do that. You wouldn't condone that, saying, it's okay, let's worry about it later, which is basically what he did when Russia invaded Ukraine. And then saying, well, I'm going to invade Venezuela, which I know there was dictatorship in Venezuela, but I think you can't just invade a country and then not worry about what's going to happen after the new regime comes in. And America has not done really well with this. When you look at Iraq, you look at Afghanistan, setting up democracy isn't easy. Just because you go invade with military force doesn't necessarily mean that those democracies are going to flourish. Democracy is tough. It takes hard work. I'm an optimist. I think American democracy will survive, but I think we have to rebuild. And I think our credibility in the world because of this president has been significantly diminished. I'd be even curious as what the popular opinion is Canada of him. I hear your perspective, but probably not very popular at this point.
Just 2 points to make before we finish. Number one, about democracy, and you mentioned Venezuela. So look at that. The Nobel Prize winner, Machado, she is definitely a legitimate person to come back to Venezuela and possibly win election. And who is on her way is Donald Trump. He doesn't need her in Venezuela. He's happy with the present situation where he gets oil from Venezuela, or he direct oil where it would go from Venezuela and so on. So he doesn't need Machado anymore. So there's no question of restoring democracy in Venezuela. It's just go and continue what's good for Trump. And
there has to be a transition plan. There's no transition plan. And so that's the problem. No. You can invade all these countries and then you have just, and so I just feel like he's using military force for political expediency, for securing his own power, his own legacy personally, and also using it as a threat. And I don't think that's fair to the world because we're the United States of America. And so it's going to be interesting to see now what happens as we approach the midterm elections and also the presidential elections. I think the Democrats need to focus on a presidential candidate that is strong in foreign policy, strong in coalition building, has the international experience. And so whether it's, you know, Andy Bashir or Gavin Newsom and someone like Mark Kelly or someone like Pete Buttigieg, I think that could be a good team. I think you're going to need a leadership team that can combine the executive experience with the foreign policy experience. Of course, Kamala Harris is going to make a case that she has that, but I think she's already had a chance. I hope I've been okay today. I love the show.
You did wonderful. Thank you so much for today's program.
I will see you on Friday. I'll be back on Friday.
We will continue. We will have a lot of new data on Friday.
Yeah, I'll be coming prepared with updates, and it's great to be back from vacation hiatus as an analyst.
Excellent.
Hope you like the new glasses.
Yeah, you look wonderful. Thank you so much. And I will see you Friday. Good luck to all our listeners. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.